In the news, the Zimmerman trial, Trayvon Martin, civil rights activists are saying that blacks can't get a fair trial, but they weren't on trial. It was a man who happens, I might add, to be Hispanic. His mother is Peruvian, and he was accused of second-degree murder, and he was acquitted. You got any thoughts?
I think it's just a no-win situation, Pat, for anybody. I mean, Zimmerman will never have a normal life, and the 17-year-old has lost his, and what a tragedy the whole thing is.
Well, Zimmerman's lawyers are now going ahead with a case of their own against news organizations. Charlene Israel has that story.
The not guilty verdict sparked demonstrations in cities across the U.S. and a debate about the legal justice system.
I couldn't imagine being that family right now. I just thought we were going to get some kind of justice.
You see little bits and pieces, and you have to speculate and think of the whole trial just from those little pieces, whereas the jury, they're there for the whole trial. They see all the evidence, and they have everything to consider.
The Justice Department announced Sunday that it's considering filing its own charges against Zimmerman, now that he's been acquitted in the state case.
The reality is, in these types of cases where there are very serious questions, we know there will be a state phase, there will be a civil phase almost assuredly, and then there will be a federal civil rights phase.
But experts say federal prosecutors face a high bar, proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Zimmerman acted because of Trayvon Martin's race. Meanwhile, Saturday's not guilty verdict means Zimmerman's lawyers will pick up his lawsuit against NBC News. Producers there misedited his 911 call. The abridged version plays up a racial angle and is said to have convicted him in the court of public opinion. Many experts say some media reports handled the case poorly from the start, turning a complicated case into a simple one and focusing on negative information about Zimmerman. His attorney blasted the media for turning Zimmerman into a monster. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
You know, they showed that young man. He was 17, and he was a fully formed young African-American male. They've showed him as a little boy, like 12-year-old pictures. And that NBC thing, on the 911 call, Zimmerman's calling and say, look, this is a suspicious person. He's wearing a hood, and he's out here. I think he may be a particular criminal. And the 911 operator said, well, is he Asian? Is he African-American? So forth. And Zimmerman answered, he said, is he a black male? And he said, I think he's a black male. NBC News edited all of that out and then put Zimmerman calls him, I'm following somebody, he's a black male.
I think one of the things you said, though, that so, to me, makes the whole thing difficult is I'm following. I mean, that operator kept saying to him, don't go, someone's coming. I mean, you just can't have people doing that.
Well, you can or you can, but I mean, there'd been some crime in this area, and the criminals were wearing these hoods, and so it's one of those things. We have a criminal justice system. People are considered innocent until proved guilty. The jury listened very carefully and intently. It was a very fair trial. The prosecution threw the book at him, everything they had possibly, and they couldn't make a case. And so the jury said not guilty. So that should end it. So let's ask our friend Al Sharpton and others to cool it and stop grandstanding and trying to get political points. The deal is over, and the Justice Department should not even consider bringing some kind of a case. It would be an outrage. Well, there's another fight we've got. We'd like to fight here. It's hot summer, and it's going to be a scorcher today. The political battle over abortion in Texas is far from over, and Wendy Griffith has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Wendy.
Thanks, Pat. That's right. Democrats in Texas are promising to fight the new abortion restrictions in court after the state Senate passed the bill. A filibuster and rowdy protesters blocked the measure late last month. The Republican majority passed the bill late Friday night with all but one Democrat voting against it. Republicans rejected some 20 amendments proposed by Democrats who wanted to water down the proposed restrictions. Those restrictions include a ban on abortion after 20 weeks. It also requires abortion clinics to raise their health and safety standards. More than 2,000 demonstrators filled the state capitol building to voice their opposition. The high-profile case of abortionist Kermit Gosnell has energized pro-life supporters who stood their ground at the Capitol.
We're here to make sure that if you call it safe abortion, it better be safe abortion, and it's not.
Governor Rick Perry is set to sign the bill into law this week. Well, CBN News has learned that Sagan, the woman featured in our story about Eritrean refugees tortured in the Sinai, has been freed. CBN spoke with Sagan on the phone while she was held captive. She described her terrible treatment at the hands of her Bedouin captors. The human rights advocate on behalf of these Eritreans shared the good news. However, Sagan did lose the baby that she was carrying. Many other Eritreans are still being tortured and held for ransom. The advocate is appealing to the U.S. to put pressure on the new Egyptian government to stop this human trafficking. And if you'd like to see our story on their plight, please log on to cbnnews.com. French President Francois Hollande has once again ruled out exploring for shale gas while he's in office. France has plenty of shale gas reserves, among the most in Europe. Supporters say drilling for it would help the weak French economy. France's highest court is set to examine the government's ban on exploring for shale gas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the world shouldn't trust Iran's new president. Iran is getting closer and closer to developing a nuclear bomb, and Netanyahu warns the regime isn't just targeting Israel, it has its sights set on the U.S. as well.
They're building ICBMs to reach the American mainland within a few years. They're pursuing an alternate route of plutonium, that is, enrich uranium to build a nuclear bomb. One route, plutonium, another route, and ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, to reach you. They don't need these missiles to reach us. They already have missiles that can reach us. They're doing that after the election. So they haven't yet reached it, but they're getting closer to it, and they have to be stopped.
Netanyahu says he won't wait until it's too late to launch an attack on Iran. Pat?
You know, Wendy, I have never been in favor of starting a war with Iran because there's so many Iranians who really hate the regime and they would like to get free from it, and they would probably rally around their country if there's an attack. But I think the free world cannot allow a group of fanatics to get their hands on these hideous weapons of mass destruction. One of these bombs can obliterate a city. And they'll be aimed at Europe, and as Netanyahu said, they will ultimately be aimed at the United States of America. So we just don't need that. But if that comes about in the Middle East, I understand the Saudis are already have plans, have sites set up to have missiles that are targeting Israel and targeting Iran. So they're ready for something to come, and if there's an exchange of nuclear missiles, the entire Middle East could be in chaos and flames. We just don't need that. But are we going to ask Israel to share the full burden? I think we are, because nobody else seems to want to take the responsibility. But that new president of Iran is anything but a moderate. He has been one of the hardliners. And he has tried to obfuscate the extent of the Iranian nuclear activity. As a matter of fact, he bragged about the fact that he was lulling the West to sleep in order to enable the Iranians to continue enriching uranium. So it's a bad situation. Here's Wendy. Wendy.
All right, Pat, thanks. Is Iran trying to exert its influence in the Western Hemisphere, in Latin America? The State Department says Iran doesn't have much influence there, but some experts say they're wrong. And they recently went to Congress to highlight the radical Islamic regime's ongoing intrusions. Dale Hurd has our story.
House Republicans called a hearing after a recent State Department report said Iran's influence in the Western Hemisphere was waning. Experts before a Homeland Security subcommittee said Iran is still cultivating a vast terrorist network in Latin America that threatens the United States.
In effect, what the Iranian regime is doing is, as it has become constrained in its immediate periphery, it has begun to look further afield for allies in various regions of the world.
But missing from the hearing was the star witness, Argentine Special Prosecutor Alberto Nisman, who was prevented from traveling to Washington by the Argentine government. In May, Nisman announced that Iran has infiltrated several countries in Latin America, including Brazil, Chile, and Colombia, for the purpose of setting up intelligence networks to carry out more terrorist attacks in the region. Nisman was the prosecutor who brought charges against Iranian officials for the 1994 bombing of a Buenos Aires Jewish center that killed 85 people. Members of the Homeland Security Subcommittee have sent a letter of protest to the Argentine government for preventing Nisman from the hearing, which itself could be a sign of Iran putting pressure on a Latin American country. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. The leader of Egypt's military is defending his decision to remove President Mohamed Morsi from office. The army took the action after millions of Egyptians took to the streets. The general says Morsi violated his popular mandate and created problems with key parts of the government. Morsi was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt has a new temporary government, and it strengthens the position of those who oppose the Brotherhood. Pat, is Egypt now moving in the right direction?
It seems like they are, and I'm applauding their moves. I hope the United States will recognize what an important thing it is.
Democratic Senator Mary Landrieu of Louisiana has introduced a bill called the Freedom to Pray Act. It would prevent the government from holding back money from groups that let people get involved in religious activity if they want to. Landrieu says she began working on the bill because of an incident that she heard about. It involves a young Marines program that could lose its federal money because it included voluntary prayer and the mention of God. Well, thousands of viewers in Mozambique, Africa are watching CBN programming on buses. CBN partnered with Inner Cape Coaches, the largest privately owned bus company in southern Africa. Each month, 135 buses run CBN's program Turning Point, reaching 120,000 passengers. This summer, a Portuguese version of the International 700 Club will be added to the playlist. Very pretty bus as well. Well, you can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international.